Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I'm Kirti Sophia Purnachan, and in today's session we'll be learning the poem Anecdote of the Jar by Walt Stevens. In the previous class we have already discussed about the author Walt Stevens, and in today's class we'll be dealing with his poem Anecdote of the Jar. I placed a jar in Tennessee, and around it was upon a hill. It made the slovenly wilderness surround that hill. The wilderness rose up to it and sprawled around no longer wild. The jar was round upon the ground and tall and of a pot in air. It took dominion everywhere. The jar was grey and bare. It did not give of bird or bush, like nothing else in Tennessee. So that's the poem. It's a 3-stanza poem with 4 lines each. Now we'll look into stanza 1. I placed a jar in Tennessee. Here the speaker places a jar in the middle of rural Tennessee. A jar is a simple object that reflects the way that people seek to categorize, contain, and control the world around them. As we know, jars are solid. They are human-made containers that can be used to preserve food and all. And it also evokes images of factories and mass production. Perhaps it suggests that the jar here is meant to symbolize the stifling convenience and structure of modern life, isn't it? We all get food and many other things in containers like jars. Okay, so that reflects the current society and modern life. Above all, the jar seems to represent civilization and serves as a sort of emissary of the human world. So the first line gives us some straightforward action, isn't it? There's a speaker, there's a jar, and it is placed in Tennessee, and all these things are told in the first line itself. And round it was upon a hill. This line gives us more details about both the jar and where it was placed. The jar is round in shape, which is not of a big surprise. Okay, almost all jars that we see are round in shape. And the jar isn't just placed in Tennessee, but it is placed on a hilltop. Okay, it's placed on a hill in Tennessee. When we think hill, we think round. A hill is round in shape. Okay, hills are soft, much rounder and calmer than mountains. Okay, mountains are quite steep, but hills are quite round in shape and very soft and subtle. We can imagine this jar sitting perfectly on the crest of a little hill, isn't it? We can imagine it very clearly. Though this jar is an outsider placed by a human on this hill, already we can see it as the king of its little territory, looking down upon everything around it. Okay, so this jar is placed on top of a hill in Tennessee, and we could assume that this jar is a king, and that king is on top of the hill or in his throne, and he is looking down and he could see whatever happens around him. And this is the second line. Moving on, it made the lonely wilderness surround that hill. Now the jar is affecting the world around it. Apparently, there's a lot of wilderness around the place where the jar is. This wilderness is slovenly or unclean. It's very messy, or it's very crude. This wilderness, described as so beyond control, would be unaffected by something like a jar. Yet this jar made the wilderness surround the hill upon which it rested. Saying that a jar made wilderness do something is an example of personification on two counts. Okay. Thus, saying that the jar can make something do anything, or that wilderness can obey orders, is personification, because a jar can't make somebody do something, and also the wilderness would never obey to a jar. So these things are personified over here. The sound of the word round and hill twice in 4 lines, isn't it? We could see it twice in the 4 lines, or in this first stanza itself. This repetition makes the poem sound enclosed and static. Static means it's not moving, just like the jar. The jar can't move on its own, isn't it? Somebody has to take the jar and put it somewhere. Otherwise, the jar would be there wherever it is. So likewise, we could see that when the round and hill and all are repeated, this repetition makes the poem static, or we feel that the poem is standing and not moving at all. Even the word wilderness stays within the given sounds because the first syllable echoes hill, isn't it? Wilderness, the first syllable is W-I-L, and it echoes a little bit of hill. Okay, so these are the important things that we should note in these lines of the first stanza. In the previous class itself, I have told that the poems written by Wallace Stevens are a little bit complicated, and it has a lot of depth into it. We can't just understand it in the peripheral level only, but instead we have to dig deep into it to understand a lot of meaning. So that's all for today. I hope today's session was fruitful for you all. If you like this video, do give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more interesting videos. So once again, thank you so much. See you again in the next session. Bye-bye.